This is Ed Verner with a quick 20-year retrospective on Plant City's downtown. Basically, I did this 2 years ago, and at that time, I was 53 years old. I had 3 children. It was worth pointing out I was a sailor, a pilot, musician, composer, writer. My work history is varied, but at that time, I could lay claim to about 10 years of working in citrus harvesting and caretaking in the area, 2 years in a cemetery funeral home in Pinellas County, new automobile dealerships, a smattering of time here and there over a 10-year period, restaurants, 3 years of involvement. Both of them had been in downtown Plant City. One failed and one succeeded. I also had been an investor with a country western honky tonk for a dozen years and a general manager there as well. And also at that time I had 5 years association with the Plant City Observer. None of that really matters when you think about downtown, property development, and management. I had been doing off and on for 33 years. A lot of different hats worn simultaneously. Obviously, I'm not 1,000 years old. But what does that matter to downtown? Well, our family's maintained our offices in downtown since 1919. That's 100 years, and it's worth noting out that during that time, we never had our offices anywhere else. So we basically have been in downtown Plant City for 100 years. We renovated over 100,000 square feet of downtown Plant City space, and we've turned it into business professional space. We've also turned it into retail space, residential apartments, and even some federal governmental offices. Our showpiece was the Lee Building 20 years ago, and there's a few pictures here in a row that just kind of describe the Lee Building when we started. And what it was able to be done to it. It had sat vacant for about 20 years, 10 of which in that state you see there. This was the interior before, and even then it still had some beautiful architectural features, which renovating old buildings like this are prone to give you those. And that was our hallways. You'll see down there the first opening after a long absence of downtown activity. There's a camera museum exhibit in the general public hallways of the Lee Building now. And it basically was our showpiece, and it's been our corporate office going on 20 years now. I point out there's mainly 3 phases of most any and all small downtowns in America when they have a success story. They start off back in the day when downtown is all there was. And of course, every business was located in downtown and no business was not. So it was the only thing available. Then these downtowns go into decline. And that's when basically the worst of it is when you can't give it away. Literally, that building there, our Lee Building, was refused as a gift by the city at the bottom of our trough. Then the third phase that happens after downtowns get like that is, of course, revived. And our downtown in Plant City is in revival. So our downtown has gone through this, of course. We suffered a residential exodus, and then we suffered a retail exodus. And then we had the exodus of the governmental offices, at least most of them. And then we had our church declines and splits and relocations from the downtown core. I like to say people need to marry, bury, and scurry in downtown when it's truly at its peak. You know, when I started, I took a map of downtown Plant City, and if you do that and you start to color in just under the category of who owns what. Well, what is owned by the city or the county or the feds? What's owned by the banks? What's owned by the churches? What's owned by prominent families who maybe aren't going to make change right now? What's owned by special interests who, again, for whatever reason you think aren't going to move? If you colored in our downtown, this starts to be what the map looks like. And then those areas that are not shaded with color are the areas more likely susceptible to rapid change. Compare contrast that, if you will, to what most people have to go through if they're going to develop something, let's say, like Lakeside Village Shopping Plaza over in Lakeland, where most of Plant City shops. If you were to make that same aerial map of that, and then you were to look down on it and color code it with who owns what, it would look like this. That's just a polite way of saying, in that case, you only have one party. Whereas in downtown, you have to herd cats. And just remember, you can herd cats. So in our case, you have to remember, like any small town, these debt spaces are owned by difficult entities. They're sometimes wildly disparate in their motivations. So when you ask these people, what's wrong with our downtown, you'll hear first, of course, always parking. And of course they're wrong. Parking is not a problem. We don't have a parking problem in our downtown, never have. And the next thing you'll hear is security. I just don't feel secure. And again, they'd be wrong. Security is not a problem. The crime rate in downtown is no different, and in fact probably less than certain areas of Plant City. So what is wrong? Perception. People's perception of our downtown can be wildly different and disparate from reality. Welcome to the world. What does work in Plant City's downtown, at least in these last 20 years of renewal, is business professional office space. Certainly works. Organizations that exist with a built-in clientele. Another thing would be internet professionalism. That's basically anything you can do on the internet. Why not work from your laptop computer in a beautiful downtown instead of being in an overpriced area? The nanny trap retail, or what I call entertaining retail, that's where people aren't shopping because they needed it. They're shopping because they want something to do, and they typically are on the cheaper end. And also the specialty non-big box retail, things that are custom built, things that are perhaps unobtainable elsewhere. Another success story for our downtown is the residential component. We've added quite a few apartments in the last 10 years, and there's usually a waiting list. However, the bad news is they've almost all been on the low cost end. There's insufficient critical mass of entertainment and or convenience for the higher end residential. It's something we need to improve on. Now the list of things that, in my opinion, don't work currently in our downtown. One is the extreme high-end retail snob stuff. Right now, we don't have a critical mass of that, and also Plant City is small enough to where our rich people don't want to spend their money here. They'd rather go to Sarasota or far enough away to where they don't run into envy and malice from their neighbors. In addition, the higher-end residential, insufficient currently. There's not enough youth and entertainment, or there's a lack of critical mass to get and support the convenience you need for high-end residential to be in our downtown core. Now, that is something we need to work on, but keep in mind, Plant City's downtown is basically only 2 stories tall. Compare that to Lakeland or some of your other successful downtowns. No matter how many square blocks you have, if you don't have 5-story buildings, it's difficult to do the high-end residential component and to get critical mass for those convenience items. But Plant City's downtown has a lot of good news. One of those good news items, first off, our city hall. We stayed in downtown, and that is huge, folks. It was a big deal. Our library is still in our downtown, and it doesn't have any dilution of satellite offices outside the downtown. That's good news. Both of these organizations really support downtown's feel. Our city streetscapes in the linear park, they're attractive, they're genuine. Our city does its good job keeping them in good repair, and it seems to care about them in a really healthy way. More good news, some of our banks at least have stayed in the downtown core. Our ceiling height has been increased. Years ago, if you were going to build anything in downtown, you couldn't go over about 3 stories, but that has been changed. And now if someone did decide to redesign an entire city block or 2, they could go higher. That helps the future have a lot of different possibilities. I spoke earlier of the residential component. That continues to be good news. They are the wrong residents in some ways, but it's still better than nothing. And it is a good news item. Also the Midtown. Has not been built yet, and that's frustrated a lot of people. However, it did succeed in removing a giant blight on our downtown. Much appreciated help in the right direction. And having the engines of care and concern, the Chamber of Commerce, the EDC, our City Hall, and the Main Street program, all of these working together, it seems like the horses are all pulling the wagon in the same direction. Whereas in many small towns and downtown efforts are really stymied when groups like that fight. The bad news for our downtown is we have no convenience in grocery or shopping. Right now, if you're one of my residential tenants and the battery goes out in your remote on a Saturday at 3, you're going to have to get in your car and drive just to get a roll of toilet paper. Other bad news items. Well, we lost the Social Security office in our downtown. That was a horrible loss to the entire city, actually, and good luck getting your check now. Our tax collector's office left downtown claiming it was a parking issue, but we wound up renting that same spot to another government tenant with no problem. They just didn't like it, and it was a sad loss for downtown that we couldn't lobby successfully to keep them in our downtown. We also lost our post office in downtown, and they left no sub-office behind. Horrible loss, nothing we can do about it. We lost our police station, which also left our downtown, and it really hurts not having a law enforcement hub in the downtown core. Perhaps in the future something good can be done in that regard. Compare that to Lakeland, where they did not suffer that loss. This brings me to the intangible benefits associated with governmental office locations. Generally speaking, they will create an intangible benefit to the areas around where they are located, just simply by the traffic they generate. And that intangible benefit belongs in Plant City's downtown. And no other area of Plant City needs it or deserves it at all, and certainly not more. These are my opinions. I hope you enjoyed them and they're worth what you paid for them. And don't forget to support Plant City Photo Archive.